I'm with Richie Blank, who's the Outreach Coordinator for Plaquemines Parish. Richie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Charles.
So, Richie, you've got a major project on your hands right now because coastal erosion is the topic. We've got 1 million people living below I-10. We're at Carnarvon right now, which I guess is where it starts in 1927.
Yeah, absolutely. So just upriver from here, the Mississippi River levee was blown to allow fresh water to bypass the city. The theory was that if that water could get out of the river as quick as it could, the water would just run faster past the city and the city of New Orleans could be saved.
That flood of 27 changed everything. I mean, I think 40% of the state was underwater. And then we created this levee system that didn't exist, or was amplified after that flood because it was so dramatic. And now we're paying the price because all that sediment just goes into the Gulf.
Absolutely. So after the Great Flood of 1927, Congress implored the Corps of Engineers to build a massive Mississippi River and tributary levee system that stretched all the way from Cairo, Illinois down to the Gulf of Mexico on both sides of the river. It was one of the biggest public works projects in the history of the planet at the time. Down in the delta, the sediment, it's confined in the river by the levees and it's jettisoned off the continental shelf. And so, from New Orleans down, the wetlands that are naturally sinking, as all deltas do, they're starved of sediment, and so there's high levels of erosion. The annual accretion that sediment would put on top of the land, that's not happening anymore, so there's high levels of subsidence that aren't being mitigated.
25 million cubic yards of sediment a year is what comes down the Mississippi. Is that about right?
It dwarfs the cargo that's carried on the river.
Louisiana almost didn't exist if we go back further enough, and that sediment was brought down, it developed Louisiana, and now we've confined it to one spot off the shelf.
Exactly. And so it's just making the Gulf of Mexico a couple inches shallower off of Southwest Pass every year, and it's not doing any good for the wetlands. But at the same time, the commercial fishermen have become used to using the basins as they're configured. For the last 80 or 90 years, they've built multi-generational businesses around having a certain salinity envelope.
What that means is you got the salt water in the Gulf of Mexico and you got the fresh water in the Mississippi. And like oysters need a certain salinity to live on. So when you change that up and you say, hey, we got to divert stuff to rebuild the land again, you're changing the fresh water's being dumped into the Gulf water or the bays, and that's hurting the oysters.
Exactly. And that's something that needs to be worked out as we move forward.
You actually live in the area. Katrina hit you hard. So the other deal is that if you don't replenish the land, the next storm, there's no place for people to live.
Absolutely. This is the challenge of our lifetimes, trying to figure out how to protect the coast enough to where we could still have civilization in Louisiana. And there's going to be a lot of hard choices that are going to have to be made. Communities like mine are beyond a cost-benefit ratio of being saved, and that's incredible. That's people's lives. That's the Louisiana culture itself is being affected by the work that was done in the early 30s to build these levees.
We're also seeing that this wall was built. I mean, with 30-foot gates on the roads that would stop the storm at a certain point, but if you're on the opposite side of the wall, you're in trouble.
Definitely.
But here, we can see there's a lot of sediment coming through. Mm-hmm. So as you guys are, the challenge also, I guess, is to figure out these diversions, how to get the most sediment in a diversion too.
It's bold action, but it's based on science. And the Mississippi River is what built Louisiana in the first place. And it's going to rebuild, vast amounts of marsh. We're facing 2 to 4 feet of sea level rise in Louisiana. This is what the state is endorsing, and there's other indications that those levels might even be higher. So I think the best that we could hope for at this point is a controlled retreat. People need to be aware, of what they're facing, and they need to, take that information and use that when they're deciding where to invest.
The graphs, the charts, you see that red and see this is going to be gone, and this is the best case, and this is the worst case. It is alarming. At the same time, it's almost out of our control, the sea level rise. That is something that is going to be a global concern.
I think in Louisiana we have the opportunity to lead by example. The biggest cause of global climate change is carbon emissions, and our economy is based largely on that. And so you have folks that live in my community that they rely on the oil and gas industry as their means of income, but it's going to swallow their community eventually.
The diversion brings not only just the water and the mud, but it also brings fertilizer and seeds and just starts a whole new ecosystem. As you go through it, you can see that it starts to replenish the delta.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take that long.
So we'll head up to the new delta that's forming just here in a second, and you're going to be pleasantly surprised what the river has created in just a short amount of time. So I want y'all to take a look how there's you can see there's new sediment that's being accreted on top of the land here, what happens is when the tide is high and the diversion is running and the land is over top, sediment is deposited on top of that land. And you know, the hope is with the big diversions that can keep up with sea level rise.
What we have here, this is new delta.
Yeah, this is a new delta formed by the Carnarvon diversion. And the Carnarvon diversion was actually set up just as a salinity control structure. It wasn't even designed to pick up sediment like the planned diversions that are going to be south of here.
And we can see this would also be great for migratory birds, has a lot of other benefits.
Yeah, wetlands are an excellent carbon sink. They store that carbon down in the earth. You're absolutely right. This is an excellent habitat.
That water actually, it's got a lot of surplus fertilizer from the farms. So I'm gathering that does help this grow very well. Not getting to the Gulf and the dead zone area is probably a benefit as well, that it's going to be used to grow plants where it can.
Wetlands definitely can be used to reduce nitrogen that's in the water.
Lake Pontchartrain Basin, they created a lot of the trees that we just passed out here.
Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation and Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana have been planting thousands of cypress trees in this area.
Why cypress?
Cypress is it's impervious to rot, it's resistant to termites.
You're looking around though, it's as far as you can see, this is all new.
Yeah, this is a new
delta. I mean, it's an amazing amount of land that's been recreated from this, I'll say minor diversion, so to speak.
And the Carnarvon diversion hasn't been operated in the last 3 years. We've been missing out on that land building opportunity. And so the existing diversions that were designed as salinity control structures, we need to reevaluate them. How can we operate them to achieve the maximum land building efficiency? How can you maximize the efficiency of these structures while impacting the fishery minimally?
You guys aren't just doing one project. It's not just diversion. It's pipelines, terracing, barrier islands.
For sure. There's a lot of different tools in the toolbox, and there's multiple lines of defense strategy, starting at the Gulf of Mexico with barrier islands, marshes, bridges, levees, vegetation planted in front of the levees to knock down waves, ultimately raised homes, and then an evacuation route. So there's a lot of different things we could do to mitigate against storm surge.
We actually went out and we saw where they're growing premium oysters now on the surface. So there are people trying to figure out how to keep the seafood industry around by different techniques. And LSU built a $3 million facility in Grand Isle to help with the oystering. There's a lot of things at play to make this morph to the 21st century and beyond.
Definitely. It's important to look at the past, but also where we're headed, and there's a lot of really great opportunities coming up to where we can get out ahead of this and do the most good.
Well, Richie, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Definitely.
All the work you guys are doing is phenomenal. And it is like 6,000 people coordinating. That is a big orchestra. Thanks for all you're doing.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks for having me.